Thank you, Dr. Chin. Appreciate it.
You're very welcome and deserving. Have a wonderful show.
Thank you. So welcome everybody to the second hour of Mindshifters Radio. And today is Wednesday, April the 19th, 2023. And their call-in number is 563-999-3581. And press 1. And that puts you into queue to talk to us. And we would love to hear your comments and questions because that makes this your show. And I will welcome Michael. And I will say the person you're expecting to call in is not on the switchboard yet.
Okay, thank you, dear heart. So welcome, everybody. Delighted and honored that you're here as we move forward with this conversation about first century Aramaic forgiveness and the corollary tools that move us in the direction of truly functioning as we're designed to function as human beings. So delighted that you're here. And several years ago, we actually spoke in South Florida at a center of a friend that, went back to the early 80s. Yeah, I guess it was the early 80s in Atlanta, someone that I worked with in South Florida. And so we had been speaking at her center, and a young lady had contacted us, and she's written a book, Olivia Benson, on dealing with father issues. The title of her book is For the Love of My Father, a Spiritual Guide for Women Healing from the Absence of a Father in the Age of Spiritual Evolution. So Olivia had written this book, and actually when she was writing it, they contacted us and asked if she could use some of the ideas that she had interacted with us from when we were in South Florida. And so we had a conversation about getting on the show and just talking about what she's doing with her book and how she's integrating the forgiveness process into her work. So hopefully Miss Olivia is on the line. Is she with us, Jeanie?
Yes, she is. So 786. Okay, 786. You're on the air.
Can you hear me, Dr. Ryce?
Well, hello, Miss Olivia. I can hear you loud and clear. Glad you're here. I did a brief introduction of your book and what we're going to be talking about, so I'm excited to see where the conversation goes, just what's going to happen.
Absolutely. If you could see me, you would see that I'm all smiles, just absolutely smiling, because in case I haven't said it before, which I probably have, but, that was so many years ago when you first came down to South Florida and you were doing your rounds and you visited Universal Truth Center with the book, with your book, Why Is This Happening to Me Again? And I was just at the very beginning, first few years of my spiritual journey. And that book was such an eye-opener for me. And, the idea that things were, one of the concepts that things were happening in my life over and over again because basically, let's just say I was attracting it.
Right.
And,
oh my God, I'm involved in my life. What a radical idea, right?
Yes, it's me, that was the beginning of a very important aspect, which of course then led into forgiveness. And, I know we're talking about my book, but for those people who are listening, I think, there's some books that are absolutely timeless and can be helpful at any point in your life if you're really looking for genuine healing. And I think that your book is one of those books. Why Is This Happening to Me Again?
Well, thank you for that acknowledgement and for using it. And then I'd be excited to see how it has evolved in your work, that you used some of those ideas and what you've done with it. As you mentioned that idea that, I'm involved in my life, or, maybe I'm attracting this. That part of the conversation for me has kind of evolved into the fact that almost everyone, by virtue of the fact that we're born into this world, the way the world is working at this point, we're, by the age of 4 or 5, we are all card-carrying members of the one world religion of blame. You know, there's a lot of conversation about, the satanic one world religion is coming. Excuse me. The satanic one world religion has been here from the beginning. Go back and listen to the conversation in the Garden of Eden, where, the conversation is about how God's at fault. God, that woman you gave me, it's God and the woman, according to Adam.
Yes.
And that's, that idea has just been put through virtually all the cultures of the earth, and definitely is a big piece of the puzzle that needs to be reversed. Got to quit that church.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so much more, and now that you say that, when I first started on my spiritual journey in New Thought, and I don't know if you know this, but I grew up as first of all, I was baptized in the Catholic Church. My mother at some point then became a Jehovah's Witness. And there was a significant middle part of my life there where I was a very serious Jehovah's Witness. And then when I came to South Florida, I went to a very conservative Christian school, Baptist, we would say. And so I, in that whole process, had sort of felt like I was addressing the issues that I might have had, but eventually I came to realize that, though you can be a part of a religion or religious group or whatever, and that doesn't necessarily mean that you are going to be addressing your issues or healing to your issues. For some people it can, but it doesn't absolutely make it so. And then when I come into what we'll call as a general, let's just put a general category of New Thought, one of the saddest things I heard was like I'm responsible. They didn't say that in those words, but in other words, you are the core of what's happening in your life. Now, right after that, I heard that. Then I heard you are it, but you also, if you have the power to create, let's say, this dysfunction in your life, you have the power to undo it. And that's the most empowering part. The most empowering part.
I'm with you 100% in that.
Yeah, so what happened was that I was doing my life very challenging circumstances. My dad left when I was 6 years old. As I describe it in the book, my mom and my dad had what I call the War of the Roses, and the family joined in, and it was just pretty much an absolute horror. I cannot even, the things that happened, we don't even have enough time to get into it. But the good news is that I sort of didn't really think about that. I was a very optimistic kind of personality, and I just kept moving forward and trying to do different things and going on with my life. But then came a moment where I realized that certain things were happening, for example, very easily, which I believe a good proportion of women who are what I call fatherless, or who've had an absent father, or have had a bad relationship with their father, a good proportion of them have issues in relationships because there's some programming that maybe has gone askew. So I didn't really think about it, but then came a point where, I was married and then divorced, and then I started to realize that even though I had sort of continued to push through the experiences and push through life, there was still some work that needed to be done to sort of clear out. And that's about when I got into, some of the New Thought teachings and Universal Truth Center, and came across your book and a couple of other books, which, aside from mentioning your book specifically, I mentioned as well some of the other teachers that were very important. And one of them, and you might be familiar with her, is Edwin Gaines, who does a lot of work on forgiveness. Yes, and she wrote the foreword to the book. And she was, right directly to forgiveness. And I found that was the key, and it still is a key for continuing to heal my life.
Definitely the core of the whole solution. And of course, to do that, one has to start to look inside at those places that most people live their lives avoiding and not wanting to deal with. And one of my favorite sections in the scriptures in regard to this point is the space where there are a large group of disciples with Yeshua, and they basically say, well, what do we need to do to stay on the good side of the Creator? What needs to happen? And Yeshua tells them, and half of the disciples literally get up, leave, and as they're leaving, their statement is, too hard a saying. In other words, it's too hard to look in here and deal with this in order to clean up my life. And literally, they left and never came back. And I think that's the faction of so-called Christianity that created the story that, well, there's nothing you can do. You're hopeless, helpless sinner. You just have to let him do it. And, you go back and listen to Yeshua. That wasn't what he was suggesting. He's saying, there's a work to be done, and you better get to work, or resolution's never going to happen. And so it's definitely challenging to look at the unresolved dramas and traumas, not only of our own childhood and our own relationships with parents especially, or authority figures, but the generational patterns come into play as well. You look at that statement that says, look to the lives of the fathers, plural, i.e. not just direct, genetic parent, but grandparent, great-grandparent, great-great. Look to the lives of the previous generations, for ours are but a shadow of theirs upon the earth. And if we don't deal with that, then, of course, the shadow, because we are created beings, we just keep creating out of the same shadow experiences, refusing to go inside and deal with those things. It's a tough job.
Absolutely. It is a super challenging job, and unfortunately, for most of us, it almost has to be a situation where we are, up against the wall, where there's no other option, we feel, and we are now, in a place where either we do it or we will live in what I call, anyway, perpetual, sort of a state of perpetual suffering. And for myself, I felt that when I came to New Thought in general, I was like, oh no, there has got to be something better. There has to be another answer. This cannot be the life I'm intended to live forever, with this sense of, I don't know where I got this from, but what I call existential dread. Like, you get up in the morning and your stomach is just bubbling because, you don't know what's going to happen next, and you have nothing to hold on to. And particularly, since we're talking about the book, when you grow up, and I said this recently in one of my YouTube videos on my YouTube channel, if you're a girl or a woman and you grow up without a father, and maybe without an uncle, in my case, none of my uncles were around, and no male figure, right? You kind of you grow up with I said it on the video, I said you grow up hard, meaning that you know for a fact that there is no male figure that is going to show up and save you. You have to be able to, and before you know what God is, and before you get to know God, you think you have to fix it yourself. You have to do everything. And that creates sort of an edge, some anxiety. For some women, it plays out as anger because they're sort of always waiting for the next shoe to drop. And so in my case, I get to the point where I go, listen, I cannot live like this forever with my nerves on edge, anxiety. I know I can't depend on my father. I know I don't have an uncle that would show up for me. There has to be something more. And the more was ultimately getting to know God. Getting to know God. Not to know about God, but getting to know God as the essence of who I am. And knowing that even when it looks like I'm alone, I'm really not alone at all. That God is present, that God is guiding, that God can be my daddy. God is my daddy, which is a statement that I use for myself from time to time. God is my daddy, and as you know, Jesus is quoted somewhere as saying Abba, which is, I believe, a Hebrew or an Aramaic word that they use to refer to daddy in a kind of a very close way. And so I say, God is my daddy. And that gives me that sense of connection with the divine within. And now you're not just sitting here in the world adrift, right, by yourself because you have no physical presence of a daddy or an uncle or whatever the case might be. But the great part about that is that if you're a woman who comes into the world and has this experience where you don't have a biological father present in your life, or you have a bad relationship with your biological father, whatever the case might be, once you get to understand that there's a reason for your experience, and that experience is intended, generally speaking, to make you stronger, to make you grow, and that God is present with you at all times and will help you through. Now, you're not a hapless, helpless victim of the circumstances. And there's great hope in that.
For sure. Now, I had gone looking for you on YouTube, and I could only find Olivia Benson of CSI. I couldn't find your channel, so maybe you could tell our audience, especially if there's anyone that's particularly interested in the approach you're taking to the conversation, how they can get to your YouTube channel and watch any videos that you have.
Yes, well,
because I did a search and it didn't show up.
Thank you for asking that question. What happens is that, of course, Marissa Hargitay is Olivia Benson, but I am Olivia S. Benson, and I have to use the S. And if you put Olivia S. Benson, then you will find me. Olivia S. Benson. Yes, and also Olivia Benson is Taylor Swift's cat, a very rich cat, but nonetheless. She's Olivia Benson. So I try to make, I think she's in Taylor Swift's will. That's what I heard. A few people sent me emails like, did you see Olivia Benson, Taylor Swift's cat is in the will? But just look for me everywhere as Olivia S. Benson.
Okay, there you are. Good. Well, everybody will be able to capture that. And I'm in full agreement that relationship with Father is such a key. In fact, you look at it, I do a video on the importance of that commandment that many people think is just a suggestion that one should honor one's father and one's mother, and that there's a really practical purpose and reason for that commandment, and that is that for most people, their initial relationship with either mom or dad is or for many people, it's a painful one. And if they never resolve that pain, then always the underlying unconscious darkness or dynamic that hasn't been resolved is going to come into play, with relationships with dad. If that was a trauma, is going to play out in terms of creating our perception in relationship to dad. And of course, if it was mom, it'll be creating traumas in relationships with women. And that when it's interesting that I make the point there that I find interesting, at least, that the command is given that not that we need to love our neighbor or love God, but that commandment in Aramaic speaks about living as the space of active love when you think of Creator, when you think of neighbor. And then in Aramaic, what that says is in order to maintain self, that we get to maintain our true created essence, our true human life, when we stand as a space of love, no matter who we think about. And so that's a command that's given for everybody, except for one group of people, and that's parents, and it takes it to the next level. It doesn't say love, it says honor. And honoring is bringing that state of being, that state of love, into action toward parents. And the practical aspect of it energetically is when we do that, literally, in order to extend love, behavior based in love toward a parent, that energy has to pass through us and heals the part of us that holds parental traumas. So it's such an important, it's not just a suggestion, it's like, this is how we heal from relationships that are often traumatic and, often become what I call in our codependence work, our power person. So you certainly struck on it there. That's exactly true. It's so powerful.
Yeah, it is. And very important point, and I know a lot of people, a lot of women, and I mean, obviously I'm speaking from the perspective of a woman, but obviously there's so many males out there without their fathers, and they have similar trauma. And all the things that I'm saying are generally applicable as well. But one of the things I'd like for anybody who's listening is, and listen to what you said, there's another aspect to it. It says honor your parents, right? And the thing is that we have to, even if you can't have a relationship with that parent, for whatever reason, you can't have it. But we honor the fact that pursuant to the order of the universe, you came into the world through these two people. And we honor that. That is the choice, some would say, that we made, right? If you know the belief system where you choose your parents when you come into the world, we honor that decision. That doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be best buddies, everything's going to be great. I don't know. Forgiveness will intercede, and we'll get to that in a minute. But the bottom line is that you honor them as the vehicles through which you came into the world. And that's a very difficult and challenging thing to do sometimes, because some parents have done some very horrific things. But honoring them as parents doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to be best buddies with them.
Right.
It means that you're not gonna a lot of people want to argue with their parents and tell them off, and all the things that you could do on a basic level. That might not necessarily be honoring them. But sometimes being able not to say the things that you would like to say to them, that in and of itself might be honoring them. And then needless to say that, and I think what turned it around for me most with forgiveness was once I understood that the challenges, the traumas, the experiences, all of those things were energies that were being stored inside of me. And that the only way that I was going to be relieved and my burden would be lightened would be if I was able to release those traumas from myself. And as I began to actually do the work, the exercises, because that doesn't just happen like, snap your fingers and it happens, but as you begin to do the work, you can actually feel yourself becoming lighter and less angry and less anxious. So your parents might have done whatever they did, but now the issue and the trauma and the negative energies are all in you.
That's
and
it.
Even if they wanted to help you, even if they changed who they were, they could not remove that trauma from your body unless you do it. You have to do it to be clean again.
Precisely. I'm with you 100% on that. And interestingly, in the Aramaic language, that word honor, as it's used in that particular commandment, would be defined as to bring love into action toward. That it's an action thing, that honoring parents, it's actually taking the step. And in fact, the quote-unquote worse they were, the more important it is to do it, because that's how you get to process through and remove the energetic patterns that are stuck in the body, in the mind, and the emotions. And, of course, the the forgiveness process is about removal. So.
Yes. It's you know, I have a cup. I have a website. It's oliviabenson.com, and one of the chapters of the book is forgiveness, a pill to take like your life depends on it. And the cup, and the T-shirts and all that kind of stuff. And the cup says, forgiveness, a pill to take like your life depends on it. And, you know, I say this in the book, you know, I went to church my whole life. I was churchified, that's how I call it. I was churchified, and I was a church girl, and I like going to church. You know, I like getting dressed and going to church on Sunday and all those kinds of things. And I had heard about forgiveness, but I did not understand that, you know, this is something that is going to remove energies, and this is how I explain it. For me, you come into the world, you're an innocent bundle of pure light. Experiences happen, and there's sort of the experiences, difficult, challenging, dark experiences are like blankets that are laid on that light that you are internally. And until you get to forgiveness, you don't remove those blankets. Forgiveness allows you to remove the weights that you have accumulated based on your life experiences and the things that have happened. And as you do the work, you feel the relief of those blankets or that weight of life, the dross of physical life being removed from your body and sort of restoring you to being that light, that bundle of light that came into the world. And as you become that light, you come more and more in line with the energy of God. Now your vibrational frequency is more in line with the energy of God. And that is the reason that as people begin to clean up and begin to come into vibrational alignment, they begin to manifest and express more and more in line with the divine.
I'm with you 2,000%.
2,000. I take that 2,000 as a compliment.
Yes, absolutely. Well, if I remember correctly, when you were writing your book and you asked if you could use one of the ideas from my book, it was, if you're in pain, you're in error. And what out of all that you had interacted with from my work, what about that phrase really, I don't know, opened a space for you, or what made that the important line to put in your book?
Well, it's funny because, we come to the planet and it's kind of like you land here and you're you're an alien, right? As a baby, you're an alien. You really don't know anything about anything, and you have to be sort of trained into the human system, so to speak. And in my life experience, and there's so many stories in the book, very difficult situations that happen that we don't have time to get into, but there had been an accumulation of just heartfelt pain and things that many times, because when you're younger, you sort of things happen and you keep running, so to speak. You could be shot. It's like you're shot and you keep running, right? Because you just pretend like it didn't happen, and I don't mean a physical shot, but you understand what I mean. It's a blow.
Right.
You get a blow and you kind of get up and you keep running. And there had been so many things that had happened to me. And I know that there are people out there that are listening that, might think, oh, it's just me, that, oh, this happened to me, and this happened to me, and this happened to me, and nobody knows all the different things that I've been through, but it's just a continuous accumulation of blows. Well, eventually it got to the point where there was pain, and I talk about in the book that my friends think that it's funny because I talk about suffering. Like, listen, if you don't get this, you're going to suffer, right? There's some things that you need to know, otherwise you will continue to suffer. So when I saw that statement and everything that was written in the book about it, I said, if you're in pain, you are in error thinking, right? So now if you come into alignment with right thinking, that means that you can eliminate your pain or reduce your pain or heal your pain. And that was the thing about it. If you are not thinking right, you will continue to suffer. And that's
right, and there is, so when you understand that, there's so much totally and completely unnecessary suffering in the world, because people, yes. Well, of course, once again, born into the one world religion of blame, it's all somebody else's fault. And until I can recognize it's not that I'm to blame for it, it's that I'm carrying this energy around, and it's time for me to work through it and let it go. So that suffering is unnecessary if one understands that it's self-inflicted. I like to use an acronym SIN, self-inflicted nonsense. We do it to ourselves generation after generation.
Yes, and you see, it's kind of challenging because like you come into the world, nobody tells you this stuff, and like you were saying earlier, sometimes people, the disciples who got up and say, "Oh no, this is too much," and I don't know what it takes for each individual to get to that place, right, where they're willing to do the work. But for me, it was clear. I had enough, and I was willing to do the work that was necessary. I would go to every seminar, read every book, go to every workshop, listen to anything that I thought was going to give me some insight about life, about understanding God, and about understanding how the universe works, that would take me out of error thinking. And I'm not sure what it takes for everyone to get to that point, but I would like to assure you that assure anyone listening that if you find yourself in a situation where you're having all of these challenges, in my particular case, the book is about having the issue of an absent father or a bad relationship with your father, but if you're at a place in your life where you are seeking healing, if you are willing to do what it takes, there's no guarantee how it's going to happen because everybody is individual. But if you're willing to do the work, if you're willing to get to know God for yourself personally, there is hope and there is healing for you. And you can turn your life around, and you can lead an extraordinary life. You can come from the depths of despair and turn it around and be genuinely all that you can be.
Yay, I'll go with that. One of my favorite tongue-in-cheek lines in regard to this particular topic is that pain has a very specific purpose, and it makes our ears grow. It gets people's attention, like, gee, maybe there's something I'm not listening to. And, the universe generally starts out with a little kick and then a push and then a knockdown, and then comes the cosmic 2x4, and sooner or later, enough pain, most people start to go, maybe there's something I need to be listening to. Maybe I need to actually take some responsibility and make some changes here. Oh.
Absolutely. That's the truth. And nobody can do it for you. And, the experiences that you have or having are significantly and usually what you need in order to grow spiritually, in order to grow in your understanding of God. These are the things that, generally speaking, push us in that direction. And I know that nobody wants to hear that, right? That's like when you say, yeah, it was rough, but you'll gain character. You'll have more character. Nobody wants to hear that, but it's really the reality. The challenges are the things that, and if you rise to them and decide to move through them, you will be better on the other side of it.
Well, my background is in the arena of electronics and a side study in physics. And again, one of my other favorite tongue-in-cheek lines is that the purpose of life is to kick us right square in the limitation, to show us what we're holding on to. And energetically, it's like the universe is organized by the law of resonance, and no matter where we go, even if we take the geographic cure, through resonance, somebody's going to find us, and bingo, there's the experience, the why is this happening to me again? And when we really start to listen, it's like, I've been through this 87 different times with 42 different people, and I'm the only one that was there every time. Maybe I'm involved in my life. I can get off this blame game and get into doing my work. So delighted that was a choice that you made to step in and get to work on it, and that you're out there supporting others and deepening their experience of the tools for healing. That's awesome.
Thank you, absolutely. I like to say, with regard to that point, everywhere I go, there I am. It's a case of everywhere I go, there I am. Because people move and then they go, oh, maybe it'll be different. And no, it's not, because unless you did the internal work to change your energy, to change your vibrational frequency, wherever you go, you're going to attract the same exact thing.
Precisely. The geographic cure doesn't work.
Exactly.
Well, any other specific thoughts, or maybe we'll see if anybody is on the call that would like to ask you a question. Any other thoughts to express before we invite people to put a hand up?
Well, just that, the subtitle of the book is A Spiritual Guide for Women Healing from the Absence of a Father in the Age of Spiritual Evolution. And my prior book, which is Answers from Within, and that one is Answers to Work-Life Issues in the Age of Spiritual Evolution. I just like to emphasize that I think that this is a special time in terms of spiritual growth and spiritual unfoldment for humanity. And, I'm just happy to be able to share what I've learned at this particular time, because I think that despite the chaos that it appears to be, I think we are advancing, and I think we all have a part to play in that advancement.
For sure. Well, let's check. Miss Jeanie, do we have anybody in the phone queue with a hand up, or anything happening in the chat room? If you have a question, if you're out there in listener land and you have a question for Olivia, push 1, and let's have a conversation, see what your thoughts are. So, Miss Jeanie?
It is all quiet on this end.
Everything's quiet. Chat room's quiet?
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Well, if you're out there in listener land, and especially if you're on one of those stations where we can't see you, our calling number is 563-999-3581. If you call that number and push 1, you'll be having a conversation with us. And you've got a hand up, Jeanie?
I do. It's area code 480. You're on the air. I think this is Cecilia.
Hi, Jeanie. Hi, Michael.
Welcome, young lady.
Oh.
How are you?
I'm, just processing things as I go through life, go through the grocery store, and all and whatever. I just keep noticing, wow, I got another issue.
Well, that's the blessing of starting to do your work. You start to see with different eyes, and you get to move through those things.
Sure. So in the last couple of days when we've had a conversation, and I say that restore myself to love, or something to that degree of working through the worksheet, I guess. I hear you say, and I heard you say it just a couple times, or when I said get back to my true nature, which is the kingdom of heaven within. And I think I heard you say, well, really, it's called the community of love. Am I correct?
Yeah, the words that the Greeks translate as the kingdom of heaven more accurately translate out of the Aramaic as the community of love, yes.
Now, okay, so good, I got that. But what I need more clarity on is what the heck is the community of love, because the last thing in the world I've created is that. Okay.
Well,
community.
Notice that, we live in a world that tends to bring us into this, as I like to call it, the one-world religion of blame, and so everybody's to blame. And when people are being blamed, even the person that you look at in the mirror and there's blame, then there doesn't tend to be much love present in that community. And so to me, it's an invitation to step up and create that community of love. Choose to be that community within yourself and choose to interact with people from that space. And of course, modeling, as Olivia's talking about with the absent father, if father wasn't there modeling that space of love, if mom wasn't there modeling that space of love, it becomes a whole different series of skills that needs to be developed because it hasn't been modeled. Most of us do what was modeled for us. And so it can take opening a whole new set of faculties, a whole new awareness to begin to live in and as that space, recognizing who we are, and then to build relationships based in that presence of love. Olivia, do you have any thoughts for Cecilia?
Yes, I do. Hi, Cecilia.
Hi.
I gather that you're deep in your process, and what I'd like to say to you is that from my experience, as you begin, it's almost like you're reconstructing every aspect of yourself, and it's a challenging process because you're taking down things that maybe you lived on, believed in for a good portion of your life. You have to sort of undo that and then replace new systems. And sometimes it doesn't look very pretty. It can look very challenging. It can look, let's just say, very ugly as you go through that process. But with faith, you're able to know, and with understanding, you're able to know that even when it doesn't look that good, I'm going through something. And on the other side of that, there is, a new world where you will find the love and the community and all that. But the process itself, it's not an easy thing, and often it does not look good. But we learn not to depend on the appearances, to know the ultimate truth.
I hear you, and I hear that I'm just projecting all of this blame, that it's all the other person's is, they're projecting on me, but it's really my projection onto life. And I guess I just never took it to a level that I'm taking it before. I've been in a spirituality, I don't even know what you want to call it. Anyway, it's
You've been on the path?
On a path, yeah. But this path seems like you're reading, their Bible seems like you're reading out of a fairy tale book, okay? There's nothing about feeling pain. There's nothing about, it made me feel good. Like I was reading myself a beautiful fairy tale book every time, every day. But I didn't do what I needed to do, which was own what the thoughts and the feelings that are inside of me, and give up the goal to whatever, and all these other tools. So this requires willingness. Okay, so I have that. I guess, but it's getting deeper. Like, for instance, it's going to sound silly, but to me it's not. I was at the grocery store, and they didn't have the regular 7th generation, no chlorine bleach, toilet paper and paper towels anymore, okay? And so I did get a job about a month ago. I didn't get it. I actually was explained to them that my hours, that I could only work, and that they asked if I ever used the cash register, and I said no, and they said, well, we'll let you train. It'll be 3 days of training, but they were 10 days apart for only 4 hours, and it really wasn't training. Nobody taught me how to use the cash register. And as a matter of fact, the people that were there that were also workers, they weren't owners, they said, oh, it takes years to understand this cash register at the computer, yada, yada, don't worry about it, you'll get it. So I wasn't worried about it. And what happened is I didn't even make it to my third day of training, which was in the period of a month of those 3 times. I didn't even get to finish my third day, and she took me aside and she said, you just look like you're not really, she couldn't even put words to it. But, I put these two concepts together of the spirituality where I was taught that I am, we are. Okay, so I realized anything that I'm just owning that of course I was somewhat uncomfortable because I don't know the cash register, and she's like, well, you know what? We can't use somebody who doesn't know the cash register. And she wasn't like, and I'm thinking, well, you knew that when I began and nobody taught me. I didn't tell her. I thought that's just not going to help anything. So I just said thank you, and I went on my merry way. So the grocery store today, at the health food store, they had bamboo toilet paper and paper towels, no chlorine, and I started to feel this fear inside of me. I have to go there to get it, because nobody else has it, and they might not even have it because they're a very small place. They don't have a lot of stock in it all. So I thought, okay, I got to work through this now because I have to go get it. But then I also thought, I'll order. Huh?
What's happening with your breath right now? Are you breathing?
I don't know. Yeah, yeah. I guess I'm not because I'm thinking about, when I talk about it, like you'd call regulatory speech, I can feel I'm not going there. I'll order it from Amazon. To avoid, I'm telling myself, but I'm going to do worksheets on it. This is too hard to walk in there right now. Because I haven't worked through my issue yet, So that's all I wanted to say.
It's a process. It's a process, and it is definitely not Dr. Feelgood. It sounds like perhaps issues of being disapproved of and rejected. And so, how do those issues look like your life? And that would be the next worksheet to do.
Yeah, sure. It came up that my family didn't even let me be on the board of directors or involved in their company. And when initially when I was younger, they gave me work that you would give someone who has Goodwill hires a lot of people, like autistic people, I think, and stuff like that. So, it was so boring. I couldn't, and I didn't get paid hardly anything, but the rest of my relatives that worked there, they made millions, So, I always blamed them for that, but then I also didn't want to go that road anyway, and work in a machinery dealer.
Right.
So, but it's that I never took it that okay. So with the job, we're trying to work through it in my head while I'm doing grocery shopping and driving home, is that that's an issue I had with jobs. I can't even keep a job with my family. And as a hairdresser, I used to use my family would want me to cut their hair, but then they'd scream and yell, "God, this is terrible! This is horrible! You're horrible! You do a terrible job!" And then I let that get in my head. So for what I was trained as, my nerves were so bad doing it because I didn't work through any of that. I mean, that was a long time ago. That was before Michael was born.
Well, it sounds like probably some worksheets on being honored would be useful to take a look at a deeper level in your mind on that.
Yeah. Okay. And you were talking about earlier honoring your parents, which is a whole different level. So I guess that's a whole different level to honor myself than to just love myself, right?
Well, honor yourself would be to function out of your true being. And we distinguish between the idea of love being a verb, most people think it's a verb, something they're going to do to somebody else, something that somebody's going to do to them, they're going to get from somebody else or give to somebody else. But the truth is, love is not a verb, it's a state of being, it's who we are. So it's really functioning out of the truth of who we are. That's why the first statement in the worksheet is, you utilize your own name, I, Michael, who am love, to recognize that's what I am. It's not something I do. It's not something I get from someone else. It's what I am. And if I've been brought up in the world, then I've been taught that, love is something I'm going to get from someone else, and then we tend to substitute approval for love, and if we're not getting approval, then, of course, we feel like we can't function as love. And all of that becomes one of those complexes in mind that needs to be worked through so that we can arrive in our own physiology as the presence of love. If you hold a newborn child, think about, you mentioned the other day on the show your daughter. Think about the first time you held your daughter and tap into the essence of your daughter. And what word would you use to describe her?
I did that exercise the other day, so I'll tell you what happened. My daughter was born dead, she was born without oxygen, so they told me she's probably not going to make it. They threw her in the ICU, not in that throw. I didn't even get a hold of her. They put her in the ICU unit. She was in there for almost 2 months. I wasn't allowed to touch her. If I did touch her, it was in an incubator. I had to have gloves on, and I could only come once a day. And so I finally got her back. She was like 4 pounds. I got her back 2 months later, and I begged them to let me take her home because they didn't want to. And it was close to Christmas, and I did, and when I held her, that's when I could do that exercise of when I held her, I felt complete. I felt love that I have never felt before in my entire life that I could remember. And so, as far as remembering who I am, I couldn't remember. And through her, I could remember, this is it. This is what this is it. This is what I've wanted my whole life.
Yeah, and notice if you hold her, if you think about that time in holding her, and ask yourself the question, is she loving me or is she love?
You know what? Now I can look back and say she's love, but at that time the message came to me, I finally have somebody to love, and I can love her and she'll love me. And I felt that was like bliss to the maximum. But I still wasn't doing what the exercise is. Is she loving me? No, she was being loved.
And we live in a culture that specializes in knocking the experience of love out of us and then sending us out on a mistaken journey to find somebody to love or find somebody to love us. And the real journey is back to finding the truth of who we are. And that's what parents are originally designed for, is to model living as the truth of who we are. I've really had that lesson reinforced with our granddaughter, who's now 4, that we take care of 2 or 3 days a week, and just realizing that it's about being who we are with these children so that they have the modeling and they have the energetic support for coming into the world as love, rather than coming in through a set of false ideas about who we are. The reclamation of the truth of who we are is so important. And of course, the biggest half or the biggest part of that journey is to collapse the constructs of our mind that say we're something other than love. And that's the forgiveness process, is the removal of those false ideas.
So my daughter got the double whammy. She got me, who was trying to suck the love out of her, she'll love me, I'll love her, with the false thing, right? And she got a father that never was around and still isn't. And so I was listening to the earlier part, and yes, I choose to work on myself so that I can be that space of love and send it out there, or maybe she'll feel it. I don't know.
Perhaps.
Go ahead.
Yeah, perhaps getting a copy of Olivia's book and working with your daughter on it, since he wasn't around for her. I assume he wasn't around much for you as well. And perhaps the two of you working on that might open another whole space for the family system, especially for the women in the family system.
Yes. She hates this kind of work. She knows I do it all the time, and I share things like what I'm currently working on with you. And I go, Michelle, is it over your head again? Because I don't, it's okay. If you're not getting anything out of the conversation, I don't have to share it. And she'd say, yeah, it's over my head, and but that's okay. Something might sink in.
Well, maybe a gift of Olivia's book might, especially with the title, might just open the space. Who knows? Any thoughts for you, Olivia?
She's very resistant, though, to talk about Dad or any issues of her own.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty typical.
I just wanted yeah, it is, especially when you're in pain and things like that. But the only thing I wanted to say, because obviously you've had conversations before, but just listening, one of the things that I hadn't mentioned that I thought was super helpful for me with your book from the beginning was the worksheets. And there were certain worksheets that I had to do many, many times. I would print them out from the, copy them from the book and do them over and over because my mind was sort of, interfering in the process. And so I needed to do it over and over again until I got to a certain point where I was like, okay. Because your mind plays games with you, and your mind actually wants to keep you stuck in the details and in the problems. But if you go past that resistance and keep doing them, the worksheets, and I'm saying that not just for you, but for anybody that's listening, it's the book and it's the worksheets, and sometimes it's continuing to do them over and over again until you get the clarity that you're seeking. That was the one thing I had mentioned before.
Okay. Are you recommending that I do a lot of worksheets before I even dare ask my daughter if she would like to read the book with me?
No. I was talking about your work on the book, you can offer it to her and see how receptive and all those kinds of things. That's a little bit different.
Are you talking about your book?
Yeah, with regards to your daughter, the recommendation that Dr. Ryce made that maybe she would be receptive is one thing. But I'm talking about your work that you were talking about, the worksheets that we're doing. And I'm saying that when I was doing worksheets, sometimes I had to do them over and over and over again because my mind was in the way.
10 times a minute sometimes.
Exactly. A racing mind, all kinds of insanity just rolling through there, and it gets in the way of your progress. So that was the only thing that I could observe.
Okay, thank you. And you know what else? I talk about God as I understand God, and she doesn't have to believe it and everything. She goes, I don't want to talk about Jesus. I don't want to talk about, even though I don't use Jesus either, Michael. I don't want to talk about anything like that. I don't want to talk about it. And so I guess I don't talk about it with her. I don't know. Feedback about
an idea that I observe really catches people's attention is, inviting people to notice that the only time they're upset with anyone is when that person violates a goal for them. Unless, I usually throw in the thought, unless you're just a generally miserable person, notice you're pretty happy with most everybody as long as they're going along with and achieving all the goals you hold for them. An upset comes forward when someone violates a goal. That can be a powerful opening or introduction to forgiveness. And you don't have to mention God or Yeshua or religion or anything. Just the simple thing of, notice if you're holding a goal and somebody violates it, that brings upset for you. And when you cancel that goal, that upset collapses in on itself, and that's the way to start to move out of upset. That can be a simple introduction, a simple way to introduce forgiveness. And yes, when they said to Yeshua, how many times do I have to forgive us to my brother? Is 7 times enough? In Aramaic, he said 77 times 70. And so that can be, forgiveness can be that simple an introduction. Well, just notice, watch what happens when somebody's violating a goal. Cancel the goal, take a breath, and watch what happens in your mind. That's a big opening for people.
Are you talking about a goal for me or a goal my daughter has that I don't mention God or anything like that ever again?
Yeah, either way. In any circumstance, just explaining to your daughter, just explaining. Notice when somebody violates a goal, your mind serves us upset. And by canceling the goal, you can collapse that upset. That can be a simple, powerful introduction without getting into all the ideas that are resisted.
Okay. But does she even know what a goal is, that she even has a goal, or?
Well, that'll be a conversation you'll have to have with her, but I assume that she, knows, I want this from somebody, and they're not giving it to me. Now I'm upset. So am I willing to collapse that? Am I willing to cancel that?
Okay.
And we're down to the last few seconds, and if we need to pick this conversation up tomorrow, we'll do that. And Olivia, thank you for joining us. Cecilia, nice to be back in conversation with you. Hope you and everybody that's listening have the best year yet of your eternal life, and blessings. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.